The hallway was silent, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear, of shame, of something terribly wrong that had been allowed to happen. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, cold and merciless as though the building itself was watching what had just unfolded. And on the ground, leaning against the wall with one eye already swollen shut, sat a soldier, her uniform torn, her dignity battered, but her spirit refusing to break. They had kicked her in the head. Not in combat, not on foreign soil, not in the chaos of a battlefield, but right there inside her own unit's barracks. The worst wounds she carried were not inflicted by an enemy, but by the very brothers in arms who had sworn an oath to protect and honor one another. The moments after the assault stretched on like hours. Her breathing was shallow, but her mind was clear. The pain radiating through her skull was unbearable, yet something inside her burned hotter than pain, something called resolve. She had endured months of subtle humiliation, jokes made at her expense, doubts whispered behind her back about whether a woman had any place in the line of duty. But this time they had gone too far. This was not training. This was not toughening her up. This was cruelty, and cruelty left unchecked spreads like fire. Around her, other soldiers stood frozen. Some looked away, unable to meet her bruised eyes. Others stared down in guilt, torn between loyalty to the unit and the truth they had just witnessed. No one moved to help her. No one dared. The fear of reprisal from those in power kept them paralyzed. That was how silence had ruled the barracks for so long. Silence and fear. But silence, as history shows, can be shattered in an instant. Word traveled fast, far faster than her body could recover from the assault. Within minutes, whispers carried what had happened to ears that were not supposed to hear it. A sergeant who had seen enough finally made a decision that would change everything. He sent a message up the chain, bypassing the very officers who had allowed the toxic culture to fester. That single act of courage was the spark. Within an hour, the halls trembled not with the footsteps of bullies, but with the arrival of men whose stars on their shoulders commanded absolute authority. 3 generals, each hardened by decades of service, each bearing the weight of responsibility for every soldier under the flag. When they walked into the unit, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Their presence was heavy, undeniable, and final. The soldiers straightened up against the walls, boots clicking together, but it was not respect that stiffened their spines. It was fear. The kind of fear that only comes when justice has finally arrived. The generals did not shout. They did not need to. Their silence was louder than any command barked in training. They looked at her first. The soldier still sitting on the ground, her face bruised but her eyes locked forward with unshakable defiance. Then they turned their gaze on the men who had done this and those who had stood by in cowardice. In that moment, the entire unit seemed to shrink. The walls felt tighter, the air heavier, as though even the building itself wanted to spit out the poison that had taken root inside. The lead general's voice was calm, deliberate, and cutting. He spoke not of discipline, not of rules, but of honor, something that had been desecrated in that hallway. He spoke of the sacred trust between soldiers, the bond stronger than blood forged in battlefields across history. He spoke of sacrifice, of duty, and of the shame of turning on one of their own. And then, with words that echoed through every heart present, he declared the unit finished, shut down, disbanded, effective immediately. The announcement struck like thunder. Careers ended in a heartbeat. Reputations built over years were stripped bare in seconds. The guilty tried to mask their fear, but there was no hiding from justice when it arrived wearing stars. The complicit lowered their eyes, silently praying they would not be named. And the others, the silent witnesses, felt the weight of their inaction press harder than any physical punishment. For her, the moment was surreal. Her body ached, her vision blurred, but her heart surged with something she had almost forgotten existed in the darkness of that toxic unit: hope. She had thought no one would ever believe her, that her suffering would be buried under paperwork and excuses, but instead, the highest ranks of command had come down themselves, not with empty words but with decisive action. They had seen her not as a burden, not as a problem, but as a soldier whose worth was beyond question. The days that followed were not easy. Healing from trauma rarely is. The bruises faded faster than the memories, and the scars on her soul took far longer to mend. But what mattered most was this: the truth had been seen and it had been acted upon. Her story became a whispered legend across bases, carried from one barracks to another like a warning and a promise. A warning to those who thought cruelty could hide behind uniforms. A promise to those who suffered silently that they were not alone. Her resilience inspired change. Training programs shifted. Awareness campaigns began. Leaders at every level were reminded that discipline without humanity is tyranny, and that no soldier should ever have to fear the boots standing beside them. And in the quiet moments when she looked back on the darkest night of her service, she no longer saw only pain. She saw a turning point. Not just for herself, but for countless others who would never have to endure what she did. If this story has touched your heart, if it has stirred something deep within you about the values of honor, respect, and the true meaning of service, I humbly ask you to take a moment to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let others hear what silence tried to bury. Your voice can carry the lesson further than any rank or title ever could. And before we end, I have a special request. Please comment below with your thoughts. Tell us how this story made you feel, what it reminded you of, or even share your own story if you faced something similar. Your words might be the lifeline someone else needs to read. Because in the end, the true measure of a soldier is not how hard they can strike, but how fiercely they can protect and how bravely they can stand, even when the whole world tries to silence them.